Hey there, welcome to the DFS build. I'm Kevin Roberts. I'm here to break down the Super Bowl 58 DFS slate at DraftKings. Usually I'd be using the DFS Hero Optimizer tools and their projections. They're not currently up just yet for the Super Bowl, but once they are, you can use the link at the bottom of this video description to get 15% off and use their tools. Right now I'm using RotoGrinders projections right here. Just really going to look at this slate from an ownership perspective mostly. I will say a few things right off the bat. I think I'm just going to eat the Christian McCaffrey chalk here. I don't really see any way around it. He's done well in pretty much every game for the 49ers this season, and he's been just as good, if not better, in the playoffs too. I mean, against the Lions have a very good run defense. I believe number one in the league. And he scored 2 touchdowns and had over 100 total yards. So, I mean, he was extremely involved as expected and super productive as expected. So he's coming in with a 27-point fantasy projection. That does feel awfully high, but it's C-Mac, and he's got the best projection by far. Number 2 is Patrick Mahomes. So, yeah, McCaffrey's a lock for me. The only question is going to be, do you need to put him in the captain slot at DK or the MVP slot at FanDuel if that's where you want to play? There's definitely merit in doing that because he is a beast, and it's very, very possible he will be the top fantasy producer for this game. But he's going to be chalky there. If you come over and look at just the captain ownership, he's coming in as the highest owned captain at 23%. So the next, I mean, it's going to be pretty split beyond that. Travis Kelce coming in at 11% ownership is pretty interesting, but I mean, even he is going to be relatively chalky. Then you have Mahomes. A little surprising to have Purdy way down here. You'd think that the 2 quarterbacks would be ranking a little bit higher. And then in line here, we have Pacheco, Brandon Ayuk, Rashee Rice. From an ownership perspective, I would try to get creative and look for ways to not have C-Mac dominating my captain spot. It's going to give you a shot at better lineups as far as getting more viable players in, and putting C-Mac in the captain slot right away at 12K is 18K, I guess, right away is going to be a little bit troublesome for building a lineup you feel really good about. But yeah, so going back to the flex side here, just from a points perspective, then you have Mahomes and Kelce as the next 2 guys coming back from the other side. And honestly, here's the thing with this game. I think number 1, put in McCaffrey. You decide what your exposure is going to be as far as dividing him up between the captain slot and just your flex play. I'd probably lean more towards him as the captain overall, but I would definitely have that close to being split. So we're looking at a lot of different options in that captain slot that will be low owned. The second thing is, the more I look at this matchup, the more I actually like the Chiefs side. The 49ers are favored in this game, but a couple things to realize. Number 1, Brock Purdy honestly has not played that well in the playoffs. He had a near pick 6 in the first game against the Packers. He had a second ball that was almost thrown. He had a couple misfires. Then against Detroit, he threw, let me see. I know he threw at least 1 pick. He did throw a pick. He had another one bounce off a guy's freaking face mask that led to the most improbable Brandon Ayuk catch ever. And that made him, look good. And then his final stat line, 267 yards and a touchdown and 48 rushing yards, which is like, come on. I know Purdy's nimble and he can move, but I mean, 9.6 yards per carry, it's a little bit egregious. So while Purdy is fine in a vacuum because it's 1 game and anything can happen, he hasn't been great. McCaffrey is the breadwinner here for the 49ers. So Purdy or the 49ers can have success with McCaffrey as an extension of the running game as a receiver. Against the Lions, he had 4 catches for 42 yards. And then let's see here. The game before against Packers, he had 7 catches off of 12 targets. So, I mean, obviously we all know McCaffrey is going to be involved in the passing game. And then obviously he's going to be a runner. And when we get near the goal line, it's going to be McCaffrey, or maybe the 49ers will get cute and use Debo or their fullback. But it's mostly McCaffrey here. So this just does not feel like a big moment for Purdy to just go off. The other side of that, and to feel better about that logic, is this Kansas City defense is a problem. Everybody wants to keep pointing to the Chiefs offense and how they've struggled for a good portion of the year. But they've gotten this far because their defense is so damn good. It is really good. And the offense is fine. I mean, the offense is not the offense it was last year. It's certainly not the offense it was when Tyreek Hill was there. But if you look back to last year, did you really think the Chiefs were going to get all the way to the Super Bowl? And once they got there, did you really think they were going to win? Not really. They didn't feel like they were better than the Eagles going into that game. They didn't feel like they were the best team in the AFC going into the AFC playoffs, but their defense was playing well, and they still have Patrick Mahomes. So, you can look to the Mahomes aspect for sure. But the thing I'm first looking at is how good this defense is. They allowed the Miami Dolphins, who are very, very good offensively, to score 7 points. They completely shut them down. Tyreek Hill got one borderline lucky touchdown because he's Tyreek Hill, and he's going to do that sometimes, and that's it. Against the Bills on the road in Buffalo, they didn't shut them down by any means, but they did give them some problems. Josh Allen did not throw all over them. He only had 186 passing yards. In fact, if it wasn't for Josh Allen's ability to make an impact as a runner and just like bulldozing and juking guys, he had 2 touchdowns and 72 rushing yards, by the way, the Chiefs might have completely stifled them. The Bills did score 24 points, but they did not go off. And in the second half, the Bills only scored 1 touchdown, and just that was it, 7 points. So, they were looking pretty good there too. Then in the AFC title game, again on the road against the Ravens, the number 1 seed, supposedly the MVP and Lamar Jackson, they gave them 10 points. To everybody's argument, KC's offense not being great, they only scored 17 points. Sure. I hear that. But as I said, number 1, defense, it's tough. It's not a good matchup. I really don't like this for Purdy at all. On the season, let's see here. The Chiefs are ranking top 10 against fantasy quarterbacks. They're ranking top 10 against fantasy running backs. They're ranking top 3 against fantasy wide receivers, against tight ends. Top 10. I mean, they have been a freaking problem all year. So it's just outside of McCaffrey, there's nobody on the 49ers that I feel really, really confident in. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to play McCaffrey. I might fade Purdy. And it feels tough to do that in a Super Bowl, or dangerous to do that in a Super Bowl with such a high-profile guy, Mr. Irrelevant. He's had a great season. He is good, by the way. He's not just a game manager. He is good. He has made some pretty big throws in the last 2 weeks. But if he's going to get ownership and be almost 40% owned, I'm going to fade him or be very underweight in what is an underrated, extremely tough matchup. I don't think the KC defense gets nearly the credit they deserve. I don't know if it's because their offensive struggles have kind of overshadowed how good they actually are, or what the case may be. But as stacked as the 49ers are, I believe in narrative sometimes. I think you absolutely have to look at projections and matchups and ownership and all these different things, but narratives can be strong. And obviously Purdy's got a heck of a narrative himself. The 49ers as a team have a narrative of unfinished business, but the Chiefs also have narratives. The Chiefs have the narrative of repeating. They have the narrative of their offense going overlooked, and then they have the narrative of their defense being as good as they've been. Can they actually stop the juggernaut that is the 49ers? And I think they can. On the flip side of that, the 49ers defense can be very, very good, but it hasn't been. In 2 extremely important playoff games, both games at home, they gave up 21 points to the Packers. Should have been more. The Packers failed on a 4th down conversion inside the 25-yard line early in the game. They got that first down. The refs did a horrible spot. 49ers got lucky. Packers could have had a 2 interceptions on the game to set them up for more points. They also missed a field goal. So Green Bay left points on the board. The 49ers defense was not elite in that game. They made plays in the end. They made that interception in the end. They forced a fumble that ended up being recovered by Green Bay. But they did not play their best ball. The next week, they played worse at home in the NFC title game. They let the Lions come in and just completely dismantle them. Detroit, sorry, I'm a Packers fan, so I'm not going to come and just like rain blows down on the Lions here when this was the first time in the last 60 years they won multiple playoff games in a single season. But they blew it. Detroit blew it. Dan Campbell should have kicked that field goal to go up 17, and that allowed momentum to shift, and the 49ers came back. But even so, the Lions put up 31 points on the road in the NFC title game. Okay, so Casey's offense has not been as explosive or as consistent as the Lions, or even really Green Bay, as if you look at recent weeks. But they're still capable. They're still capable of beating a defense that it really needs to be stopping the run up front to have really good success. They are fully capable of doing that. I will note that. The 49ers are a top 4 run defense. But if you look at the passing game, the 49ers are extremely beatable. They do have a pass rush, obviously led by Nick Bosa and Chase Young to a far lesser degree. So if they get to Mahomes, then that could be a different story. But if they're not getting to Mahomes, if Isaiah Pacheco can establish the run, the 49ers defense can get gashed like crazy. So, having said all that in a long-winded way, I like the Chiefs' offense. So, if you start setting your foundation of what you want to do, McCaffrey's in our roster, okay? About half the time captain, half the time in the flex. But for the sake of not eating chalk, let's look at who in the captain slot makes a lot of sense here. If you are just full-blown on the 49ers for this game, do what you got to do what you will, run 150 lineups and just use whatever I'm saying here with a grain of salt and however you wish to do that. This is just my strategy and how I'm approaching this game. I think the Chiefs are being a little bit overlooked here, and I think it's going to be pretty interesting to not fade McCaffrey, but fade Purdy, but slide him over to flex. And we can obviously start off with Kelsey or Mahomes in the captain slot, which isn't necessarily contrarian relative to the slate, but Kelsey is going to garner half the ownership of McCaffrey. Mahomes is going to garner even less. Pacheco even less. So you can absolutely file Kelsey, Mahomes, Pacheco, and just split that ownership across numerous lineups. Or if you're doing a single entry, maybe dig a little bit deeper and find out which guy you really, really like. For me, it would probably be Kelsey and with a Mahomes stack there. And then you see what else you can fit in there. But, I'm actually looking down here at Rashee Rice at 8%. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 highest owned captain guy. The place where the 49ers defense has been most vulnerable is down the field against wide receivers. They have the linebackers to match up against tight ends. They have the front line to stuff the run. I don't think they completely shut down Pacheco. The dude always keeps his legs moving and his body so herky-jerky. He finds a way to succeed somehow, always, no matter the matchup. And obviously when they get near the goal line, Pacheco is going to get that call. So Pacheco, just completely fading Pacheco doesn't feel like exactly the right call either. But I do think the best way for the Chiefs to find success here is with their wide receivers. So Rashee Rice is my first captain guy. He's my first pick for captain because he's going to be somewhat not unowned, but very low owned in relation to McCaffrey, Kelsey, Mahomes. But then it starts getting interesting because nobody's going to be owning these spare Chiefs guys like MVS, Justin Watson, Kadarius Toney if he's officially active, McCole Hardman. I would not go into a single entry with any of those guys specifically because you just have no idea who they're actually going to play a bunch of snaps or how they're going to use them and that kind of thing. But I think the Chiefs wide receivers are a really good way to go. And then, I'm not going to really focus on anybody that's unknown for captain besides that too much, but I will point out The George Kittle down here at 5%. Deebo Samuel down here at 5%. It goes against what I'm saying, but those guys being pretty low owned on this one game slate, that is very interesting. I think if you're running multiple lineups, Kittle and Deebo at 5% is very, very appealing. And it doesn't have to go against my logic here either, because you could argue that the Chiefs defense is so good early on, they build a lead, and then the 49ers mount their comeback, right? So, and you could just disagree with my take. And how are you, if you do and you're playing 49ers, how are you fading George Kittle and Deebo? I don't know. And then just looking at flex here, just to wrap this up, I do think it's a little bit interesting that both the kickers are under 20% here. Both the defenses are under 15% here. I mean, it's just going to be more of like running multiple lineups and just go overweight on these guys. If you're doing a single entry, do I really want to play kickers and defenses and soak up my lineup that way? Not really. If I had one way to go, I would, like I said, I would lean Chiefs. I would go Butker and the Chiefs defense. The Chiefs defense is a way better play than the projections are saying and what ownership is dictating right now. So I like KC's defense quite a bit. I think when you start looking at the flex plays, these guys are all going to be high owned. So KC at 14% ownership, I would go overweight on KC, and I would feel pretty good about that. And then you go down, look at some of these punt plays. Their fullback is viable at $800. But I'm not seeing anybody else that I feel really, really good about. Now, if I go over here into DraftKings and I'm looking at a true build of how we're going to map this out, I can slot in Rashee Rice, and I'll go get Christian McCaffrey with everybody else, pair Rashee Rice with Patrick Mahomes, and then we start coming down and looking at what punts down here make sense. What punts can we get that we feel good about? And like I said, the Chiefs' punt wide receivers are viable here. Maybe they actually rotate in, Clyde Edwards-Helaire a little bit, just because it's a Super Bowl. You want to keep your main guy fresh. But yeah, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to double down on my take that the Chiefs defense is going to play well in this game. I get the Chiefs defense in there. It gives me 6.3K over my last two spots. And while it doesn't feel good, I'll slot in MVS. And then that allows me to come back up and get a comeback for the 49ers passing game. So if I think the Chiefs defense is going to succeed, and I think the Chiefs are going to thrive here, then that does not mean the 49ers will do nothing. And I think that their guys will, obviously start trying to make up for lost time here and not being productive later in the game. So somebody like Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk to close this out looks pretty good to me. But like I said, this is just one of those things. It's a showdown slate. It's a Super Bowl. I think just doing one single entry isn't going to cut it. I think if you're going to play this, you have to play multiple lineups. So I would right away get that leverage by siding with the Chiefs, and I would get extra leverage by moving Christian McCaffrey to the flex spot. I would get even more leverage by possibly fading Brock Purdy completely or being very, very underweight on him. And I would get further leverage by playing one of the defenses, whichever one you have more of a lean on. For me, it's going to be KC. I really am surprised that the ownership's that low for both defenses, just because the game it does have a 47.5 total, but it honestly feels a little bit high based off the way KC's defense has been playing and based off of Kansas City's offense in general. So let me silence that real quick. So that would be my overall strategy. Side with the Chiefs and try to use a captain that is not going to be mega chalk like Christian McCaffrey is. All right, so that's going to do it for me for the Super Bowl DFS showdown slate. It's pretty volatile. It's not something I put a lot of money on. They have a lot of free contests at DK and other sites. I'll take advantage of those, and then run these optimizers like the DFS Hero one, and split the ownership with McCaffrey between captain and flex. I do not think I'd fade him at all, and then go overweight a little bit on some of these low owned options. Hopefully this insight helped you a little bit, and hopefully you can enjoy the Super Bowl with a big win. Thanks for checking out, and we'll see you at the top.